The church was filled with the soft hum of conversation as guests took their seats, craning their necks to get a glimpse of the bride. When she stepped through the doors, a hush fell over the room, not because of her beauty, though she was radiant, but because of her dress. It was plain white cotton, without lace, without beads, without the shimmer most brides wear. Some smiled politely, others whispered behind their hands, their eyes lingering on the absence of sparkle. At the altar, the groom greeted her with a practiced grin, but there was something cold in his eyes. As she reached his side, he leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "Couldn't you have worn something better?" he murmured, his voice laced with disdain. "This looks cheap." The words slipped out like a blade, and before she could react, he gave a small, humorless chuckle, quiet enough to be missed by the crowd, but sharp enough to pierce her heart. She felt the sting instantly, but her expression didn't falter. She kept her gaze forward, her hands steady, her smile untouched. To anyone watching, she was the picture of grace and calm, but inside, the comment echoed. It wasn't the first time he had judged her for choosing substance over show. She knew the value of the dress, not in price tags or designer labels, but in the love and sacrifice it represented. Yet in this moment, under the warm glow of the church lights, his words reminded her of a truth she'd been avoiding: respect couldn't be bought, and it certainly couldn't be stitched into fabric. She stood there, silent, the weight of both the ceremony and his quiet cruelty settling heavily on her shoulders. She kept her eyes fixed on the vows yet to come, refusing to let his words break her. There was no point in answering cruelty with anger. Instead, she let her mind drift back over the long months that had led to this day, months of working extra shifts, skipping little luxuries, and counting every dollar with quiet determination. It wasn't the dress she had been saving for. In fact, the gown she'd originally chosen, elegant, flowing, and expensive, had been returned weeks ago. The money had gone somewhere else, somewhere far more important. She had told no one, not even him. Her fingers found the small ring tucked into the pocket of her dress. It was the one she had picked for him, simple, strong, and meant to last a lifetime, much like the love she thought they shared. She had imagined sliding it onto his finger, seeing his eyes soften in gratitude. Now, as she stood beside him, she felt the faint burn of unshed tears. His comment about her cheap dress echoed in her mind, but she swallowed the ache it caused. She wouldn't let him see her hurt. She had made her choices out of love, not vanity. The cotton fabric brushing against her skin was no symbol of poverty, it was a quiet testament to her priorities, to the sacrifices she was willing to make for someone she loved. And if he couldn't see that, maybe the problem wasn't the dress at all. She straightened her shoulders, clutching the ring a little tighter. The ceremony was still moving forward, but so was she, toward a truth she hadn't quite faced until now. The officiant's warm voice began to guide them into the vows, but she lifted her hand gently, stopping him mid-sentence. A soft murmur rose from the guests, unsure of what was happening. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe, to stand tall. When she spoke, her voice quivered, yet each word carried a steady weight. "Before I make these vows," she began, "I need you, and everyone here, to know the truth." She let her gaze sweep the room, catching glimpses of curious faces, before finally resting her eyes on him. "This dress," she said, touching the plain cotton skirt, "is made from my late mother's bedsheets. It's all I have left of her." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint rustle of fabric as she shifted her weight. "I had another dress. A beautiful one. But I sold it." Her throat tightened, but she pushed on. "I sold it so I could help pay for your father's surgery last month." Gasps broke the quiet, sharp intakes of breath from relatives and friends who now realized what her sacrifice had meant. The truth rippled through the crowd like a wave, carrying whispers of disbelief and sudden admiration. She watched as his smirk, the one he'd worn since she walked down the aisle, vanished. His face paled, his mouth opening slightly as if to speak, but no words came. He looked at her differently now, no longer with judgment, but with something closer to shock and shame. For the first time that day, she felt the power shift. She wasn't the one on display anymore. It was him, standing in front of everyone, confronted with a truth too raw to ignore. And the weight of it was just beginning to settle. He stood frozen, her words echoing in his mind, unraveling every assumption he had made about her. Images came in rapid flashes: the hospital's urgent call, the staggering bill his family couldn't afford, the relief of hearing it had somehow been taken care of. He remembered how he'd told his father they must have been blessed by some anonymous kindness. Now, that kindness stood right in front of him, wearing the very dress he had mocked. A lump formed in his throat. He tried to speak, to apologize, but the weight of his shame pressed his voice down. His mind scrambled for excuses, but there were none. The truth was painfully clear: she had chosen love over luxury, sacrifice over self-indulgence. And he had chosen to laugh at her. Her hands were steady as she reached for the small ring meant for him. She slipped it from her pocket and placed it gently into his palm. The gesture was tender, almost reverent, but final. "A marriage without respect isn't love," she said, her voice quiet yet powerful enough to fill the space between them. The word struck him harder than any anger could. He stared down at the ring resting in his hand, its weight suddenly unbearable. It wasn't just metal now, it was everything he had failed to appreciate, everything he had taken for granted. The officiant stood awkwardly, the guests sat in stunned silence, but he didn't notice any of it. All he could see was the woman he was about to lose, walking away from the altar, carrying with her a dignity he would never again be worthy to touch. She turned without hesitation, the weight of the moment lifting from her shoulders with each step. The aisle that had brought her to him now became the path that would lead her back to herself. The murmurs behind her blurred into a soft hum, but she could feel the shift in the room, a quiet reverence replacing the earlier judgment. One by one, guests rose to their feet, some out of respect, others because they couldn't help but be moved. She caught glimpses of glistening eyes, trembling smiles, and the kind of admiration that came only when people witnessed courage up close. Near the middle row, a small hand tugged at her mother's sleeve. "She's like a princess," the little girl whispered, her voice carrying just enough for the bride to hear. It drew a gentle smile to her lips, a reminder that true royalty isn't defined by jewels or gowns, but by the grace to stand tall in the face of hurt. The church doors opened, and sunlight poured in, warm and golden. She stepped into it without looking back, the plain cotton dress glowing softly in the light. She felt no bitterness, no anger, only the quiet certainty that she had done the right thing. Because kindness, even when unreturned, plants seeds. Sometimes they bloom where you can't see, sometimes they grow in hearts that don't deserve them. But they are never wasted. And as she walked toward the world waiting outside, she knew hers would keep blooming, in her, and in anyone brave enough to choose love over pride. In the end, her wedding day became something far greater than a ceremony. It became a testament to dignity, selflessness, and the courage to walk away from anything that diminishes your worth. What began with whispered judgments and a cruel laugh transformed into a moment of profound truth, one that stripped away pretense and revealed the depth of her love and sacrifice. She didn't leave empty-handed, she carried her integrity, her strength, and the quiet pride of knowing she had acted from the purest place in her heart. Though he was left holding the ring, stunned and shamed, she stepped into the sunlight knowing that her kindness had not been wasted, it had simply been misplaced. Her story is a reminder that love without respect is hollow, and that true beauty is not in what you wear, but in the sacrifices you make for others. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is turn away from someone who cannot see your value, and walk toward the light of your own worth.